Buck bro. Look at this buck
Hi. Pleasure to see you as well. Hey there, how you
I'm not
doing?
shaking your hand, bro. You're a fucking piece of shit, man.
Why is that, sir?
You fucked up the entire country. You got our buddy over there.
Yeah, but how did I mess up this country?
Can anybody afford a home in this day? They're charging people carbon tax. You got 9 V8s here idling for 30 minutes. Your carbon footprint is increasing. We're getting charged for what?
You know what we're doing?
It's not stopping. No,
we're putting a price on pollution,
right?
And we're returning it to families like yours.
I don't think so. You're sending it over to Ukraine, right?
No.
Yeah. You send it over to the guy that you were with that slaughtered his own country.
You've been listening to Putin, have you?
Putin? No. Definitely don't listen to your propaganda.
Oh my goodness. We're not going to watch that a second time because it might make people retch before we start this interview. I think I'm going to have the guy who shot that video on at some point next week. We'll see. I think it's lined up and borderline confirmed, but we're going to see. Can you believe it? Just like the go-to when faced with something you don't like, you must be listening to that Russian propaganda. And so the guy says to him, "I'm not shaking your hand. You're an effing piece of SH." And he says, "Why? You've destroyed the country." Trudeau is handling it relatively well for a little bit. How have I done that? Nobody can afford a home. You're taxing carbon while you have 7 of your SUVs and your security idling while you're flying to Davos to lecture the world on the climate crisis. And Trudeau says, "You know what I'm doing with all of that? We're taxing pollution and we're giving it back to you." What in the name of sweet holy hell are you talking about, Trudeau? You're not taxing pollution and giving the money back to the people that you're taxing. I mean, you're giving me 10 cents on the dollar that you've taken from me back to me? That's one hell of an investment. And you're not even taxing pollution. You're outsourcing the pollution. Look, I'm trying to start the show without having to talk about the international horror that we're witnessing today because I don't want to talk about it. We'll talk about it tomorrow. And we'll try to digest, the abject evil that can exist in this world, and the proper, useful political responses to atrocities. Twitter is what's the word? It's not a foul. It's not running afoul, but it's awash with hot takes, people fighting, all this stuff. But yeah, I figure we can always just start with a Trudeau being a jackaninny. Watching too much Russian propaganda. Oh yeah, they're taxing pollution in Canada by outsourcing pollution to China, India. They're cutting off pollution here so that we can't make our own natural energy, so that we're forced to buy oil and gas from tyrannical Russian oligarchs or Venezuelan overlords or Iranian whatever. Yeah, we're outsourcing. We're taxing pollution, all right. You're enriching the very same people you purport to claim are evil, while crippling the people that you were elected to represent. Okay. With that said, totally unrelated to the show for today. I think a lot of people don't know about this story, but it's sort of starting to make the news a little bit now. You might remember having heard some elements of this story. You know what? Even before I do that, let me make sure that we are simultaneously live across all platforms. For those of you who don't know, yes, we are. We stream on YouTube, Rumble, and vivabarneslaw.locals.com. We're going to end on YouTube sooner than later with this interview because I'm exclusive with Rumble, and I like to have the discussions where we can have the discussions without enriching the censors. They'll get the leftover replay tomorrow, but the live interview will be on Rumble. And then I don't know that there's going to be an after show Q&A on Locals, but anybody who wants to watch on vivabarneslaw.locals.com, you can go look right there. The link is right there. Just noticed Viva's clock says 4:03. What the heck? Son of a... Oh, God, I'll fix it later. That's stupid. I didn't do anything. I don't know why that clock goes 1 hour bad. All right, so the story that you may not have heard of. A Yale student named Saif Khan, wrongly accused of sexual aggression. Criminally charged, found not guilty, and then nonetheless, Yale University goes kangaroo court, virtue signaling cancellation on a student who was wrongly accused, had a trial, evidence adduced that proved it did not just prove not guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It basically proved innocence. We'll get to it. And then, notwithstanding a finding of not guilty in the criminal court, Yale makes his life a living hell, and we're going to get into that. Then he sought to sue Yale and his wrongful accuser for defamation, and was found to was effectively prevented from doing so for legal reasons, which Saif is going to explain, and has now been authorized by the courts to sue both Yale and his wrongful accuser for defamation for the horror that they turned his life into over the course of several years. That's the 30,000-foot overview. Saif has an amazing story. Afghan refugee given a scholarship by Yale. We'll get into all of it because I do have a lot of questions about Saif's childhood before we get into the experience that he had. This is back in 2018 at like the crest of #MeToo. Let us do this now. Saif, I'm bringing you in. 3, 2, 1. Sir, I said you're still sporting the Yale sweater. So, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you? Good evening to you and to your audience.
Well, this is going to be, I think some people are going to know of this story, others are not, and they're going to be flabbergasted. We're going to get into all this because there's some nuance that you're going to flesh out that I'm going to ask you about. There's some stuff that you can't discuss. I'll probably invariably ask too many questions. You'll let me know what you can and cannot answer.
I like it that way.
Let me ask you this. Okay, first of all, who are you? I mean, I'm going to get into your childhood because I have questions, but who are you?
Sure. So, I mean, it's a continuous dynamic question of who we are. We change, and I would actually not like myself if 5 years from now I'm the same kid around the block. So it's a continuously evolving thing where I'm constantly learning, improving, and that's one part, I guess, that Yale and really anybody can never take away from me. I am always going to be me. I'm always going to be pushing. Every day, at least in the recent past, every day there's Chandler.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chandler. And so every day I wake up, I read for 5-6 hours, and I then spend another 5-6 hours thinking about what I just read. And so I'm precocious. I'm curious. At the end of the day, I just love learning. And that's what brought me to America. While my start, as you pointed out, was in suboptimal conditions. Started off in a refugee camp, crossed the border from Afghanistan into Pakistan when my parents and so on escaped the civil war and the Taliban in the early 90s. I'm 30 years old, for those who don't know. I spent about 16 years in the camp and towns nearby and 2 years in UAE and the rest in America.
Okay, so hold on. Back this up all the way. Your parents are born where?
Yeah, so I'll go pretty far. My last name is Khan, or Khan for the American palate. And so it's an earned title that you essentially have to be a conqueror. And so my grandfather and his father earned the title because they defended some castle from the barbarians who invaded the village. So that's how I ended up with the Khan, because my forefathers did. And so, but my grandfather went from the village in Katawas, Paktika, to Kabul in 70s, early 80s or so, early 70s, and he was poor. He even though his childhood was, with this whole bravery and so on, he started his own business. He took a tray, put candy on it, tied a rope to one end, slung the rope over his shoulders and tied it to the other end, and just started selling candy on the street. And then ended up making a killing, buying and selling. And he was uneducated. He never went to school. My mom has zero schooling, didn't go to any, even kindergarten. My dad has a bit of schooling, I think grade 10. And so my parents were largely born and raised around Kabul. And in the early 90s, my dad and his dad, they had been buying and selling dishware and crockery basically China ware. And a mistake that my grandpa had made was he bought a lot of wine glasses, and because he couldn't read, he thought it was juice. And so he was like, "Oh, look at this fantastic design. There's like, a neck and there's a whole cup." And so he bought a ton of those to sell them in Kabul. And during the Civil War, the Taliban saw it and accused him of bootlegging and helping people drink alcohol, which is a crime and they're punishable. And so they sent us letters saying, "By morning, if we see anybody in this house, we're going to kill you." And so in the dead of night, they just escaped and crossed over the border, and that's where I was born.
This is what your parents did. They say
Right.
we're gonna kill anybody in this house, and
Right.
they pack up everything they have,
Right.
and they pack up everything they can and leave the rest,
Right, right,
and end up in a refugee camp.
right.
In where was the refugee camp again?
Yeah, so it was across the border into Pakistan. It was designed, built, and supported by the UNHCR, the United
Nations.
High
Okay.
Commission for Refugees. Yeah.
You're born into a refugee camp,
Well, I don't remember, but that's what people tell me.
but you were raised in a refugee camp.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, like one of my earliest memories is just walking outside, because I was a curious kid. My earliest memory was just every day going out in the same direction and trying to walk just a little bit further, however far my little legs could take me, to see the end of the world. And so when I would get tired, I'd point to a tree like, okay, it's at least that big. It's at least that far. And so, I mean, I had no idea of how big the world is. And like, it was also hard to articulate it, but it's just the exploration.
I mean, what age were you when you left the refugee camp?
I think like about 4-ish or so.
Okay, so
So my dad and mom, they're generally pretty smart, so they were able to get out and change circumstances and seek better life elsewhere.
I mean, what does for those who don't know, like I picture a refugee camp and I'm thinking like from the Lord of War, something in the middle of the desert and it has fences around it. Is it built up structure? Is it tents? What does
It's a lot of tents and folks coming in to give you polio shots and other vaccines and just distribution of food. But my memory of early childhood is surprisingly non-existent, and there's a good chance that I've like suppressed a ton of memories up until like age 8. So I actually, to a significant degree, don't recall my early childhood.
Okay, that's fascinating. And do you have pictures of this? I mean, it almost feels like a stupid question. How do you get pictures of you in a refugee camp or your family?
I mean, I think folks had some. Like I don't have any on me right now, but
No. I'm just trying to like. It's such a foreign concept as to what is in.
Yeah.
All the food has to be given from outside. There's no stores. There's no.
Right.
It's kickball and survival. That's it.
Right, and it's largely temporary. And my parents, being smart enough, were able to start their own business and get out of there and go to the local town. Have a slightly more bigger, better upgrade. Have amenities like air conditioner. And like fans. For whatever amount of electricity that used to be there, because there's a rolling blackouts that happen, so you only get electricity for a certain number of hours a day, and it's far closer to poverty and less danger, because then it would defeat the point of it being a refuge, because so it's Afghanistan and poverty minus the danger.
Okay, interesting. And so they eventually make their way out to.
Right.
Is it to Pakistan or to Afghanistan?
So they were in Pakistan, and until age 16-ish, we were around there, and that's largely where I got my early education. However, most of my early education was me teaching myself. One of my favorite things to do was to go to the bakery as much as I could, because the bakery, they would give you the bread with newspapers under it so you could hold it. And the newspapers were my source of reading. And what was extra funny was, a lot of the unsold stuff from the West get then, recycled in the East. And so I would be reading about Nixon resigning in the 90s because it's like old newspapers that just never got sold or like, other stock. And so, and I barely understood the English. So I was like trying to make sense of things. And so it just, one thing that was great about the regular schooling was that they did teach us ABCs, but nobody spoke English. And so I was able to, form words and like really struggle with like, what does this thing mean? And so I was incredibly lucky to also have a computer around, in my early childhood, like 8, 9 years old or so. Very dusty, hands-me-down sort of computer, but it was there. And so the more I got acquainted with technology, the better my English got. And the better my English got, the more I was able to play around with tech. I had, in fact, a Game Boy too that was, one of those recycled boys that people throw away. And so the battery didn't work and like games wouldn't save. And so, but I had a ton of fun.
Do you have siblings or no siblings?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, but largely I don't talk about it in the media so much. But one thing I could say is that despite my harrowing experience with Yale, I ended up bringing one over to NYU, and the youngest is now at Harvard. And so I've been, despite the challenges, I've been promoting the education within my family and within my friend circles.
Okay, you glitched out for a second there. Did you say one of them you brought over to Harvard as well?
Yeah, yep. He's
So
there right now.
you learned nothing from your experience at Yale, bada bing, bada boom. I'm joking. Okay, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to end this on YouTube. It changes nothing from our end, but we're going to get into some stuff now, and I want to end it on YouTube. So everybody get your butts over to Rumble if you're so inclined, and I'm going to end it on